Okay, so I did my lab about a go-kart.
Yeah!
Yeah, that is the go-kart.
The new one?
Uh-huh.
Isn't that the new one?
It's a newer one, although actually it's like a lot of years old now, but I got it recently. So when we got it, it was an old go-kart with a like fiberglass body on it. It had a Pink Panther pink shell on it. We took that off, we got a new engine for it, and hooked it all back up. That's the intake on that side, that's the exhaust. And so what I'm actually testing on this is what can I do to the engine to increase the horsepower. So there were three things that I tried in all different combinations, and they were getting a new carburetor jet, and what that is there's a little bit like a brass tube in the carburetor that controls how much fuel goes into it. So if it's a bigger diameter, more fuel goes in. So like that's one thing I did to it. The second thing I did is instead of this air filter, I had like a K&N like style filter on that side. No, the third thing I did was I put a straight pipe exhaust onto it. And I did those in all different combinations. So I did each one by itself, and then I did each pair of two, and then I did all three together. And I had a stock run, and so the way I measured horsepower, or the way I took data to get the horsepower, is I found out with my GPS on my phone that the top speed of the go-kart was 32 kilometers an hour. And this was with the governor attached, so it would always go that speed no matter what, because it has a rev limiter. So it can only spin so fast, so that's 8.8 meters a second. So what I did was I took it and I put it on the same stretch of road on my street, and I ran it up from one spot to the other spot, 0 miles an hour to top speed, and I timed that. And I did 5 trials of that to make sure I got a good result, and I did it in the same direction because I was on a little bit of a hill. Not much, but just a little bit. But I figured out, yeah. So, and then I had to find the mass, so I took a scale and I weighed myself, and then I put the go-kart up on its end, and I weighed the go-kart, figured that out, and then I figured out how to calculate horsepower. And it turns out that that is that's conversion for horsepower versus joules. It's 700, and it's measured horsepower. I figured that was the right one to use. So it's taking power would be, I guess, delta. That's the change in time, and that's the change in kinetic energy. So it's changing kinetic energy over time, and then this 735 is because a horsepower is 730 times 5.5 times bigger than a joule. So that's the equation I use. And the results I got when I calculated the horsepower, the best setup was all three of them working together. And then after that, the next best setup was the intake and the carburetor jet together. And then after that, it was exhaust only, and then the stock setup. And below that, they actually got worse than stock. So that was interesting because it turns out if you increase the airflow to an engine without a proportional increase in the fuel flow, or vice versa, you'll get an improper fuel-air mix, and that will make the engine run a lot worse. So basically, if it has too much air in the combustion chamber and not enough fuel, it won't run right. Or if you have too much fuel in there and there isn't enough air, it won't be the most efficient combustion cycle. So that was why, if I put just the carburetor jet, that dumped a whole bunch of gas in there, and there was no extra air. Or dumped a bunch of air in there without the jet, and the opposite happens, but it's bad either way. And then removing the exhaust restriction, which is what the exhaust pipe does. If you take a muffler off, it has a back pressure in there that makes the engine kind of work to push the air out. So if you take that off and you put a straight pipe on there, there will be less back pressure, and that'll quit taking away some of your power. So removing that was a good thing no matter what. That was always beneficial compared to what it would have been without doing that. And then obviously putting all of them together worked best because we removed that back pressure and we increased the air flow and increased the fuel flow proportionally. And although I don't have my exact numbers here because I had them all on paper and I turned it in my lab report, I remember the engine to start, it was rated at 6.5 horsepower from the store, and my measurements are going to be different from that in a couple ways. One way would be that this was the average horsepower over that time and not the peak horsepower. So it was basically like revving up over that time. So it would have gotten an average horsepower. So that would have cut it down roughly in half. So then we're looking at like 3. And then some of it's going to be lost in friction in various spots. There's a clutch, and the way the clutch works is that there's an inside drum with some weights, and as it spins faster, there's springs on them, and they go out because they were held in before with the springs. But going faster, they start coming out and grab onto the drum. So that's how it engages. So as it spins up, there's a lot of friction in that you lose power there. So that would be one of the losses I had. So I ended up getting roughly 2 horsepower out of it, average horsepower, to the wheels. And from stock to my best combination, I saw like, what was it? I think it was like a 20% increase-ish in power. That was pretty good. It cut my times down. My actual times were starting more like 5 seconds, I think a little under 5 seconds stock, and then it went down to a little under 3 seconds. So it was about, I shaved off close to a second of my time accelerating. So that was my result. And I think that is it. Is that just what it's going to do? Okay, that's it. Yeah. So I actually, with that, I didn't want to buy the parts twice. I have more than one go-kart. So I actually bought these parts and put them on one go-kart. So I stole them off there and put them on this one for the experiment. So then I changed it all back again.
Did you just like floor it, or did you like?
Yeah, I floored it just every time to get for consistency, you know.
Yeah. How far did you go?
Not very far, probably.
Dude, it was 5 seconds.
Well, right.
I would have to guess it was 100 meters-ish.
100 yards.
Was this all taken on one day?
Yeah, but we're in science class. I have to use meters, so Doc will hear me on the video and be mad.
Was this all taken in one day?
Yes, the data was all taken in one day.
What was the weather like that day?
What was the barometric pressure?
Pretty nice weather.
What leather jacket were you wearing that day? What was the wind resistance caused by that leather jacket?
It was I don't know. I mean, the weather was a little cloudy, but what it was doing.
Good go-kart day?
Yeah.
Was there a bad go-kart?
Let's be real. I like to try something go-kart.
Yeah, you can see it, I guess.
That would be